Hey guys, Bear here. Now I'm going to take a look into next phase as far as how logs are going to work and how us ferals should be looking at logs. This, again, is just my opinion, but from the couple of times that I have tested and from what I've seen so far for Warcraft logs as the parsing rules, it's going to change how we play a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a change for most bosses. To look at this now would be the best part, and then looking at it again later could change a couple of things. As far as I know, faction champions will be removed from the logs from all star points and just from character page, just because it is pretty RNG of what classes you get and specs. So it varies from each one, but as far as I know, again, it's removed. Let's start with Northred Beasts. So Northred Beasts is going to be an interesting one because they aren't sure if kobolds are going to work the entire time or if they should cap it, but it still seems like it's going to be pretty much an AoE fight. As you can see here, the logs continue through the phases on each of the downtimes, so this is why like you don't see like max numbers on it. But when looking at your personal logs, you're not really looking at your max numbers, you're looking at what was cast during what points in time. But this is a very long fight, so there's a lot to break down for this. These logs aren't great, but they're pretty decent. It is seeming like a very long fight, so you could utilize a lot of your 2 and 3 minute cooldowns 2 to 3 times the fight. You could also use 5 minute cooldowns as long as you use them at the very start of the fight on the first boss, and then you can use it again on the last. But snowballs will count. They don't know how much. All this data right here is everything included as far as I can think of, because every enemy should be taken into effect for this. Again, this is very much subject to change, so everything here could change. But as far as Beast and Northrend goes, we're going to be looking just at mine. Now, this information here, from what I've gathered, is very interesting. Only because, like, well, yeah, my ferocious bite count is low. Mostly because, like, you're target swapping and the amount of time that things go down and back up, it's kind of hard to calculate exactly how many ferocious bites you should do, how much shreds you should do, how many rips. Your uptime's going to be a little weird for everything. So when you're diving into this, you're pretty much, in my opinion, looking at when you're on the boss, how much are you casting. So as far as like your uptime goes, I really wouldn't look at it too much for this fight, in my honest opinion. I would just look at casts and see your cast per minute. Again, this fight's going to be really difficult to break down, but I'm going to do my best to break it down here and see what we can get. So the main thing I look at when I look at logs is fairy fire usage, how much I'm using rip, how much I'm using ferocious bite, how often I'm casting my tiger's fury, just, you know, the simple buffs. On this one specifically, I'm going to criticize myself. I could use berserk another time. at least one more time. I probably could have used it twice. So up to 3 times during this fight, and I didn't. So that's on me. I need to get used to using it more from what I've seen for this fight, but where I was just testing it and practicing my rotation to see where I could get, another Berserk or two could have really helped smooth out my DPS a lot more. I do think using the first Berserk and using it as a swipe off of the kobolds for the phase 1 boss would be a good idea. On the second boss, you might be able to cleave them. Still quite unsure on how that's going to work, but the cleave could be pretty good. Whether Feral's cleave, I don't see it because it's a 2-target. I can see swapping back and forth just to get dots up, but other than that, no, not so much. Okay, and then let's move on. So, as far as like buffs, you want to try and keep up your Savage Roar, in my opinion, as much as possible, and then trying to basically clip your last one to get it long enough for the phase transition so you can at least get your rip up and then redo Savage Roar. It's going to be huge. Because you'll be able to get an Omer Clarity proc every single time in between phases as long as you're not focusing or trying to kill something in between those phases. But Beast Northrend, it's not looking like a great fight for us, but it's still a good fight to try and break down as best as you can. It's going to be an interesting one for sure. Alright, next, Lord Jaraxis. This fight, super simple, super fast. Cleave, cleave, cleave. I didn't do a lot of swipes, and neither did my counterpart for this, but in my opinion, swipe might be the play just to get over to the targets, swipe them down a little bit, because everything's counting on this fight. As long as there's 3 or more targets, I would say swipe your heart away. But still trying to keep up at least Rake while you have the tier 8 will be very, very beneficial for this. Maximizing your rip up time might be a little difficult if you're swiping too much. But you kind of have to justify like how many targets you're hitting and trying to get up as much as possible. But I would say save your first Berserk for when the first portal spawns so that you can swipe your heart away. And then save your last Berserk for the kill phase. Last like 10-15 seconds, maybe even the last 20 to 30 seconds for the fight. It's a longer fight than we're used to, but as the phase continues, this will be definitely something to speed run through and get below 3 minutes. So utilizing your Berserk on the correct timings is going to be very, very much of a thing for you. As far as like the rest of my casts go, I have great Fairy Fire proc uptime, which is good. My rip is a little low as far as uptime, but that's kind of to be expected. Getting used to this new rotation with 4 less seconds on rip is going to be pretty huge. Spending some extra time getting your rotation down once the phase goes live is going to be pretty big. Ferocious Bite cast, I probably could have cast less because I think I did count too many of my Ferocious Bites. So, I mean, less is always better, but it's still nice to try and get those extra bites in for the extra damage. My Tiger's Fury, I cast it on cooldown. There's pretty much no question about that because it's like 2.1. That's exactly on cooldown. Savage Roar uptime, almost perfect, but I mean you can't expect everything to be perfect. It's pretty high for where it is, but keeping your Savage Roar up is still going to be the number one increase of DPS. And I would say for this, because I got my two Berserks off, this is almost like perfect. I wouldn't say it is perfect just because like nobody's perfect, and I know I definitely am not perfect. I'm not the best feral out there, but it's still one of those things. I probably shouldn't have cowered, but I did. It feels bad pressing that button, but sometimes you got to do it. Especially if you're pumping really hard early on. Sometimes you have to, and it feels bad doing that. Probably should have asked for a salve instead. But it's okay. Alright, let's move on. I'm not even going to go after faction champions. Follow your raid leader's calls. It's a relatively simple fight as long as your raid lead knows exactly what to do at every moment and have everybody else under control. Alright. Twin Valks. This is going to be another good fight for us Ferals because it is a 2-target fight. Let's go look at damage done. Let's take off mine. I didn't do great on this fight. I did die on this one, but still 11.3k when a bunch of it is going to be like probably canceled out because of the damage that you get from the buff. That's on Warcraft logs will be taken out. So you'll see a lot of this equalize as the phase goes through. But it's not bad DPS. Considering I was only about 1500 below the other Feral. But the other Feral was in full bis, so I really can't complain with the amount of DPS I did. Right, let's take a look here. Rip uptime. That's the first thing I look at when I'm looking at my logs is rip uptime. Like, that's bad. 2-target fight, we should just be sitting there for the most part. But I did a lot of bad things, which I probably shouldn't have. And that bad thing is I did swap a lot between light and dark. That can really hurt you. It can really ruin your uptime on the rest of it too. So you got to be kind of careful on that. I do think as well I cast too many Ferocious Bites. Just by looking at this, I did cast too many Ferocious Bites. But we'll look further into that right now. Fairy Fire casts are, I would say, a little low. But still pretty decent. Rake uptime is pretty good, above average. Savage Roar uptime is really good. My Rip uptime is definitely low. I could have done a lot better on that. Tiger's Fury, I could have used at least one, maybe two more Tiger's Fury, and that could have been a little bit better. That could have helped with my Rip uptime. I think Ferocious Bites 1.4, I think that's high for this fight. Just because I was swapping a lot. I should have focused more into my Rip uptime. But that can really change. As you can see, I did get one of each essence, so it's really a matter of fact of like what do you start with and what do you need to switch to. As long as the correct target's being killed, this could be a interesting fight to try and dive into. But you kind of have to go with your gut feeling and what your raid leader calls for this. All right, let's move on to Anubarak. So for Anubarak, they might cap the damage that comes off of the ads that spawn, but as you can see, like, our top damage for ferals is going to be swipe. It's getting your 1 dot up, getting your swipe up, and just sitting there. As long as you're in the good rotation of getting all 5 of them hit by it, you're going to be really good on this fight. Cleave is really good on this fight. And as you can see, warriors are really high up there. DKs are high up there. Mages are high up there. Like, anybody that's got passive cleave is going to do really good. It's a longer fight, and it's going to be difficult for you to get the padding down just so that you don't have to do too many kite phases. But the kite phases are going to be necessary, and your communication for that fight is going to be really necessary for heroic. We didn't down it on the PTR this time around or last time around because we were just testing it. We were testing strats and seeing what could be done, what can we get away with. So it is always better to get those wipes out on the PTR. So that's what we did. But just basing it off of what I've seen, it's going to be quite difficult to get into the spots for tanks. So you kind of have to be patient with them. It's going to take a lot of practice. And the first couple of weeks will be who did the most PTR practice and who can do the mechanics the best. And that's where a lot of the 99s are going to start. But later in the phase, it's really going to show who can do it the best and who can kill the boss the fastest. Next, I might do a tier list for next phase, but I don't think it's really necessary because, like, everybody's really good. There really isn't a class that does bad. Like, even Ret Paladins, you can see them high up on here. Like, there really isn't a bad class here. Anyways, if you like the video, if you want me to do more breakdowns, I can. I do live breakdowns for other people all the time. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message and ask me questions. I'm always down to help people, especially ferals. Try and bring the community up. Anyways, feel free to like, subscribe, follow me on here or even on Twitch at twitch.tv/threatbur. And you guys have a good day.